Hey everybody, it's Dell here, and I'm going to be doing a video today that is unlike one that we've done here before on the channel. So 4 years ago, I decided that I wanted to start learning how to code because I wanted to make an app that would help gardeners grow food. So that was where kind of all of everything we've done came from, was that original idea. And I want to tell the story of kind of what the first hour of coding looked like, and how I got into it as someone who hadn't coded before. I mean, I had some coding experience, but I'd never built anything like a mobile app before. So I just really wanted to make a video that was for somebody out there that has interest in coding potentially, or that's curious about what it looks like to make an app and what and how you can go about making one. So really, that's the purpose of this video. And I've brought in my friend Zach here to help with this. So Zach, do you want to give some background kind of on what your computer experience is, and what kind of how you're coming into this video from someone that's potentially interested in learning how to code?
Sure. Yeah. So mainly my computer experience has really been in film and video editing, Photoshop, Illustrator, a little bit of graphic design, but mostly like editing, video. So we're talking, Final Cut, DaVinci Resolve, color correcting, stuff like that. So I've never really coded. I've done a little bit, and so After Effects, there's a little bit of expressions that you kind of have to code in sometimes, but it's really just copy and paste. So I've never really coded anything to really build something, within an app or web development, anything like that. So this is pretty new to me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. So I'm excited to do this, and I think that it's hopefully going to help a lot of people out there. Coding is something that if you are, with everything going on with code, I know a lot of people have lost their jobs. They're having to change careers. They're unsure of what to do. And I know there's a lot of people out there that have been interested in coding, and we've had people reach out and ask us about this. And I've wanted to make a video like this for a long time, and I feel like we're coming up on the anniversary of when we started Seed to Spoon, when we started this on the day of the election in 2016, because I felt like I wanted to do something to make an impact on the world, and not to be too grandiose, but I wanted to feel like I was doing something in the face of a lot of the angst going on in the country. And I'm not getting political with this at all, I promise. It's really just I wanted to do something to push back against a lot of the negativity that I felt, a lot of the anger that I felt. And that's what Seed to Spoon was for Carrie and I. It was a place for us to feel like we were doing something to help people and to put out good into the world. And that's still what drives, what we do with Seed to Spoon. And from the app to our social media, which is geared towards providing a place where you can go just to kind of see content that's either uplifting or about gardening or funny or cute, or just a place you can go on the internet. There's never any stress. And so yeah, I don't want to ramble too much about that. I really want to get started and start showing what it looks like to start coding. And I want to tell briefly the story of my first day of coding. So just kind of set the stage of where I was coming into it. I wanted to build this mobile app. I reached out to a lot of my friends that were developers, and I just had a hard time finding somebody that was willing to build it for me. I didn't have money to pay for it, and developers are very busy, and it's hard to find that kind of arrangement. So I was out to lunch with some of my coworkers, and I was working in the software field at the time, doing testing and stuff. I wasn't really doing coding. I was doing I was writing some automated test scripts and doing stuff like that, but really my job was based around finding bugs in software and doing stuff like that, not really coding. So I was out to lunch with some of my friends, and I was talking about how I wanted to build this app, and I was talking about what I wanted to build and all of that. And one of my good friends, Luke, said, "Dell, I think that you've really overestimated how hard it is to build an app, and this is something that you could do if you just dedicated some time to learning. This is something that you can do." And I was kind of lit a spark, and I listened to him. And when we got back from lunch, one of my other good friends, Justin, helped get me set up with kind of a test, like an initial project of just a sample app that was a list of plants with some text for each plant. And that's what I want to build right now with you today and with Zach, is I want to go through and recreate kind of that first hour of coding and expose you to all the different things you're going to need to know, to get started, and show you the different areas and how things work together, and then point on the path of here's where you need to go to learn more, and here's how I learned, because I learned all of this through online training and through the help of different organizations and communities that are out there and friends, and I want to help set you up with all of that too. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. So I'm going to share my screen, and warning, there may be things that don't work 100% or go wrong on this. This is part of coding, and sometimes that's what happens. So hopefully everything will go all right here, but sometimes it doesn't. So you'll get to see some of that as well. So let me close out everything I've got here, and probably should have done this already. Bouncing back and forth between Windows and Mac, I always forget if it's clear or CLS. It throws me off every time. Okay, so, and I'm on a Mac right now. If you're on Windows, that's fine. It doesn't matter what you're on. Either one work fine for what we're going to do today. So the first thing that I want to show you is this thing called Ionic Framework. So Ionic Framework is a set of tools, probably is the best way to describe it. It's a framework, really, that makes it easier to build mobile apps, because it lets you build apps with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then it makes the iOS and the Android app for you, basically, from that one code base. So if you're out there and you have experience with HTML, like if you edited your MySpace back in the day, that's HTML. If you made it look different by changing the style of colors and stuff, that's CSS. And then JavaScript is something that I had to learn. I had to take some time to learn because I didn't know it as well, but it's not a difficult thing to learn. So it lets you use those three things to build mobile apps. And that's what I use for Seed to Spoon. That's what I've used for a number of other apps that I've built. It's used for 10% of the apps in the iOS store and 20% of the apps on the Android Play Store. It's really growing in popularity, and it's a great thing to start with. So I'm going to show a bit about kind of what Ionic does for you and that kind of stuff before we get too far into it, because this is like something that when I first saw this, I was blown away by what was out there. So Ionic has all these things kind of built for you. So all these different, they're called UI components, and we'll talk more about what that means later. There's a lot of terms and terminologies and things like that that you're going to have to learn along the way, but don't get overwhelmed with all of them because there's a lot of them. So these UI components are basically just pre-built things you can use. So like a card, for example, if I click on this card, see something like this is pre-built. And if I come in here, like here's like some code that would basically give me a card. So I could copy this Ion card here, paste it over, and then I've got a card. So it does things like that make it really easy for you, because it automatically styles them to look the way they should look on either iOS or Android. You don't have to spend a lot of time doing that. So so let's back up and kind of go back to the beginning here. And one thing I want to mention too that Zach is here to do as well is to help if there's something that like I'm talking about that doesn't make sense or something like that, he's going to jump in and kind of ask steering questions or stuff like that too. So Zach, feel free to do that anywhere along the way.
Okay. I do have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So from my experience, the video world, we have applications, like editing suites that we use to do all this stuff in. You're on a website, but the website is also a framework.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, explain how this works to me.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Zach. So this website is just like the website for this framework. So I'm not actually going to do any coding on this website or anything. I'm just going to pull like documentation and examples from them. So consider this like the Bible of Ionic. So if I come in here and look at this developer code and that stuff I was looking at before, it's just kind of, here's how you do everything. To actually build in this, I'm going to do all that on my actual computer. And I'm going to use a program called Visual Studio Code to edit the files that will produce the mobile app, basically. So this is a free app made by Microsoft. You can just Google like I did and download it. It's a quick download, and it's here's kind of the secret about software development. you're just editing text files. So you could use Notepad to code. I do that from time to time. Like I've had to, where if I'm on a computer, like maybe I'm on a virtual computer that doesn't have code installed and I need to make one little change to something, you know, like I'll just use Notepad and just go in and change it real fast. So like, but Visual Studio Code is built to make it easier because it has all this stuff. Like see this screenshot over here that has this drop down? That's called Intellisense. So what that means is it's trying to predict like what you should type or what you might want to type. And it has all sorts of stuff like that that makes coding easier. So that's on top of other stuff it does. But but Visual Studio Code is basically what most people use now for this type of development. There's other code editors out there as well, but really like this is the one that I tell everyone to get started with. And this is the one I use for most everything that's this type of development. So this is the actual editor that you'll use. I already have it installed, so I'm not going to go through the install process. I think
okay, cool.
figure that part out. But once you get it installed, it's going to look just like mine does whenever I pull it up. So that's what we're going to actually use to do the development and stuff. And so this get started, yeah, that's probably what was confused. This get started is just like to get started. Here's like their guide for getting started. So if I click on this, then it takes me to this page. And then they have this like cool app wizard that lets you go through and kind of configure how you want things to look and stuff. I'm not going to do that on here because I'm going to do like the way that I did it and the way that I'm familiar with just kind of just doing it by hand. And I feel like you learn more about kind of what we're doing that way anyway. So this is the installation guide for how we actually go through and get started with coding an Ionic app. So there's a couple things you have to install. Really one thing you have to install first is called Nodejs. So don't get overwhelmed. This is where I started to get overwhelmed in the beginning. You don't need to know anything about Nodejs or how it works or anything. Like really you don't. You just have to install it. And I'll give as best I can an overview of what it is. It's a set of tools and libraries and all sorts of stuff that makes I'm not even going to do like I'm not going to do a definition justice. It makes it possible to run JavaScript locally on your computer. Like basically it mimics a lot of the stuff the browser does. I don't think it's worth really going in detail. You just need to download it. Do this one here on the left. Once you get it installed, then you're going to have access to this thing called NPM, which is really like the important thing that we're looking for here. And NPM is short for Node Package Manager. So there's all of these packages that are out there on NPM, which is like a directory of packages. So if I go to this website called NPM, there's all these different packages out there. So like if I want to build something for YouTube, here's the YouTube API, or like there's all these different packages I could pull from, right? And this thing has millions of packages in it, and it's the main there's like one main package provider, and it's NPM, and it was recently bought by Microsoft. So it's this is where you go for everything for that kind of stuff. So even like Ionic, to install Ionic, you do it from NPM. That's like the Node Package Manager, like the source that you're installing from. So this command, this npm install, is what you use to install things from that package manager to your local computer so that you can do development with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let me try to back up a little bit here. Okay, so we're going to use the application, what's Visual Studio?
Yep, Visual Studio Code is the app that we're going to use to actually edit the code files and all that.
Edit the code files, okay. And Ionic is a framework. Okay, this is the connection. How do those things two connect? That's where I'm getting confused. Is it like a plugin to Visual Studio Code that allows you to do things within Visual Studio Code?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Ionic is the package that's up on npm that we're installing. That how do I explain this? Okay, so Ionic is the set of tools that makes all this mobile development stuff easy. So technically, you could do this kind of mobile development by just creating text files on your computer, naming them certain things and setting it all up, and then you could do all that on your own. That's how Ionic was built, not with text files, but like this was built by somebody to do a process, right? Mm-hmm. So you're basically installing their set of tools on your local computer. And maybe this will make a little more sense once we kind of get into Visual Studio Code and start actually doing some of it. Then you'll kind of see how this works. Let's go ahead and jump in and start and kind of see and go from there. So if we jump into Visual Studio Code, this is the actual like editor that you're using. Ignore every button over here except for this one up here. Okay. Let's focus on this one for now. This is Explorer. This is basically just like a Windows Explorer or Finder on the Mac, like whatever you're used to. This is just like a typical like Explorer. So like right now I don't have anything opened, right? So if I want to open a folder, then I could come in here and I'm going to actually I'm going to create kind of a new folder for it's going to do that automatically whenever we do like the instructions that we're going to follow here. So let's go ahead and do that. So this npm install, we need to install Ionic first. I already have it installed, but you can install it. Like if I run this again, it's just gonna make sure I have the newest one installed. It's not gonna hurt anything, right? It's just gonna like update if it needs to, otherwise do nothing. And I'm gonna go into the terminal. So this terminal is the same thing that, are you familiar with the terminal on the Mac? Have you ever used it for things?
Yeah, I've used it for a few things.
Okay, yeah, so this terminal thing, so this window that I have down here is the exact same thing as this. It's just a different view into it, right? So it's just a way of using it like within another app. So this is the exact same thing that that I have. So here's where I'm actually able to like run commands and stuff that are against the operating system. So we're installing Ionic on our operating system from npm. We're going to do that npm install, and then it said -g. The -G stands for global. So I want to install this like across my entire computer. If I wanted to only install something from npm like within one program I'm building, then I would not have the -G. It's not important to understand that. I just want to kind of explain what that meant. So I go through and I install Ionic. And it takes, this part can take a bit depending on your internet connection. I already had it installed, so it didn't have to go through the full install. It just updated it to the most recent version. Now, the command that I need to use Ionic to start a new app, and I'll explain what this does once we come over. I'm going to go ahead and copy it and then paste it over here. So this Ionic Start My App tabs, I'm going to change part of this. So the Ionic Start part is what is the command that's going through and creating a new like template of an app, basically. So this command will go through and kind of create all the files and everything that we need to have a basic app up and running that's just like sample stuff in it. And then we can go through and modify that from there. Okay, so that's what this command is doing. And I'm gonna change some of the stuff. So this my app was the name of the app. We're gonna call this one example app. And then there was tabs after this. There's different options for like what you want the example app to how you want it to work. So the options are tabs or menu or blank. There may be others, but those are like the primary ones. So like some apps have like a menu where you can expand to see more and there's no tabs at the bottom, right?
Right.
Other apps have tabs at the bottom. So this is just kind of how you do that. We're gonna go ahead and choose tabs for now. All of this stuff is like in the documentation for Ionic. So like each one of these things, you like if someone wanted to know more about like what all the examples are, you can go find that in their documentation. It lists out like everything that you can do with these different commands. So if I run this Ionic Start example app tabs, then it's going to go through and it's going to ask me the framework that I want to choose. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining all of this and what this means. We're going to choose Angular, and I'll come back to this later on. Yes, on this, I'll explain what that means later on as well with capacitor. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. Basically, capacitor is what is used to make the iOS and the Android versions from this code base. So we'll need that once we get ready to build an actual app to go on a phone. But all of our development, and this is something I should have mentioned up front probably, all of our development is going to happen in the web browser, and the web browser is going to act as like a fake phone, basically. So we're going to pretend that web browser is a phone. We're going to do our development there, And then when we're ready to actually test something on a phone and do things on a phone, then we'll build whatever version of it that we need and put it on that phone, and then then we can go from there. Does that make sense, Zach? Awesome.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So this part can take a while too, depending on internet connection. There's a lot of stuff going on here that's going through and doing. You don't need to understand any of this stuff that's happening in here. I know, like, I was super intimidated, like, when I first saw this stuff, because there's just so much stuff happening, and there's, well, what does this mean? Did I do something wrong? Like, don't worry about any of that stuff. Like, none of that matters to you right now. So when it's done, it gives you this set of instructions here. So CD, just change directory. So we're going to go down into that directory that we just created. So this is where the app is, and I'm going to open this now in code, that directory. Well, okay. Okay, so here is the folder that we created from that Ionic Start. So when we ran Ionic Start, it went through and it created all of this stuff for us. And the only part of this that you need to pay attention to right now is this source app folder. So the stuff in here. Everything else outside of that is not stuff you need to worry about right now. It's either configuration stuff, or it's stuff related to Ionic, or stuff related to Angular, which I guess now is probably a good time to talk about what Angular is. Do you have any questions before I go down what Angular is, Zach? Should I pause to answer anything else?
I'll have a question after you explain Angular, I believe.
Okay. Does it make sense kind of where we are right now, like how we're using Visual Studio Code, like what this is, like what we're looking at? Does all that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think to a degree. I mean, you know, there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of stuff happening, and you're kind of telling me to ignore a lot of it. So that's kind of where I'm at. So
yeah, I understand.
Yeah, so I think I understand, and okay. Yeah, I'm following along.
All right, so everything that you see here, like now we are inside of Angular. So let me explain what Angular is. I'm gonna have to give a bit of a quick history lesson here in order to do so. So JavaScript really started to take over as like the default for how web applications were made. And like, I mean, it's been happening for a while, but like mid 2000s really took off. And when that happened, there were a lot of different frameworks that popped up. And this is, let me explain what a framework means. So this is how I think after this, you'll hopefully understand what that word framework means. So a lot of different people had different ideas about how you should use JavaScript to build things. So, and really those like development teams started to establish some of their own ideas about like, here's how you should do something in JavaScript. Here's how you should, here's how you should structure code. Here's all the different things and ways you should build things using JavaScript. And two of the teams that really gained prominence with kind of their idea of how you should do things were the teams from Google and the teams from Facebook. So Angular is the JavaScript framework, which is like a set of conventions and standards of how you should use JavaScript and a structure of how you should do it. So if I Google Angular and I go to their homepage here, so this is the homepage for Angular, and it's very similar to Ionic in that there's all these examples and everything, but this kind of explains everything about how you should use Angular and how you should do different things. And I'm not going to go into, there's a lot to learn here. And this is part of like, if you decide to go down the coding path, this is where you've got to spend a lot of your time is learning how all of this works. But the great thing is that there's amazing help, like training videos online and documentation and all sorts of stuff that you can watch that walks you step through step of how to learn all of this stuff. So don't get overwhelmed with the Angular stuff. We're going to touch on like pieces of it, but really I just want to kind of show what the different pieces are that come into play when you want to build a mobile app, and here's all the stuff that you would need to learn. So that's kind of, I don't want to go too far down the Angular rabbit hole, but we are going to be doing some Angular specific stuff that you'll see kind of as we go. So the main thing that we're going to focus on is going to be just one tab that's created. Let me go ahead and kick off this app that was created. Because so right now we already have, I'm going to keep doing that CLS instead. I'm so used to being on Windows. So this Ionic Serve command will actually kick off this app that was created and launch it in a browser for us to start looking at. So if I run this, then you'll see what we already have without having to do any coding whatsoever. We already have like a template of an app. And this one can take a while on the first one, first run too.
How did you know to type Ionic Serve?
Great question. Right here, it was on this getting started one.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was also after that command ran before, and there were all those like list of instructions, it was the last one there. Okay. So that's where it opens by default in like your default browser. I'm going to switch to Chrome instead because the development tools are a little bit better in my opinion. So this is the URL that opened automatically, this localhost :8100. If you've never seen that before, localhost just means this computer. So on this computer, I want to look at port 8100, which is the default port that Ionic uses to broadcast its web server. So that's all that means. And it's important to understand like what that means, like and how it works eventually. But right now, it's not. It never changes. Localhost is always what it is, and there's just different ports. So for Angular, it's 4200 by default. You can change the ports. So sometimes if I'm working on like 3 different apps, you know, at once, I'll change the ports to 3 different ports. So that way I can have all of them running and they're not stepping on top of each other. So you can make it generally whatever port you want that isn't being used. So this is the app, and right now it doesn't look like a mobile app. There's a way in Chrome that you can go into like app mode. So if you press F12 on the keyboard, it's going to go into this mode here. And I think by default, it doesn't have this button click, but this toggle device toolbar, you can click on that. And now you can come in here and choose what kind of device you want to have in here. So I've got like iPhone X on there. And so this is the app that we already have without having to do any code whatsoever. We have this app here that we could go through and put on our phones, and it doesn't do anything, but this is what we have. This link that it has here goes to their page here that that we were looking at earlier that has all the different examples of building stuff. So this is what we have, and what I want to do now is go through and build what I had after the first hour of coding from this point. So my friend Justin sat down with me and we built a very simple app that just had a list of plants with some information about each plant. I want to go through and build that with y'all and just kind of show what that looked like and all the different things that we had to do to build that. Before I go into that point, Zach, are there any questions I should answer or anything you want to kind of go over before we dive in there?
I don't think so. I'm not going to stop you yet, but
all right.
So, well, I will. Okay, so right now you're looking at it. Kind of did this kind of template, pre-built this app, this tab app, and you have tab 1, tab 2, tab 3. So, and basically what you're doing now is populating this with data.
Yeah. So basically, I'm using this as a template to get started.
Okay.
So right. I'm going to go in and make tab 1, and let's just get started. So let's go in and make tab 1 say something different. Okay. Make it say plants instead of tab 1. I've got like a zoom window in the way. Here we go. I'm going to close out of that terminal. And if I go into this tab 1, so I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole of how like how this tab 1 works and all that kind of stuff. Because I didn't understand that the first day. I had to learn all of that. Yeah. But I understood that tab 1 meant that it was going to be tab 1. I understood that enough, Right. And I understood that HTML was the view for how things worked, and that this TS file was the JavaScript for driving it. Those were the parts that I understood kind of from looking at the framework and from what Justin had just told me. So like, that was the amount of knowledge I understood about how all that stuff worked after the first day. And then I had to learn a bunch of stuff. And when I'm done with this part, I'll show like where I learned it and how I learned it and all that kind of stuff. But but this was enough to get me going. And I could come in here and see, okay, well, here's tab 1 page. And actually, to throw a bit of a wrinkle, it took me a little bit to figure out that the tab, this was actually for the tab itself, not for the, let me move my window so I can come back in. So it was for this tab here, not for these tabs down here. But after clicking around for like a minute, I saw, oh, there's tabs. And then if I clicked on there, I saw, oh, here's all the different tabs, right?
Okay, so you can rename the actual buttons.
Yeah. Another trick that I still do, like when I'm coding, if I can't figure out how something works or where something is, and now I'll introduce the second button to you, is the search button. If I come in here and just do a search for tab 1, it shows me all the files that have that text of tab 1. So I know that like tab 1 is right here, right? So I want to find somewhere to change that. So I do a search for tab 1, and I'm able to see, oh, tabs page has tab 1. So if I come in here, I can now just change this. So now we are in the HTML of the tabs page, just kind of show where we are right here, tabs page under tabs. This is the HTML file. And I can change this tab 1 to say plants. And this is the label for the tab, right? Now I know there's like you see this tab equals tab 1 thing too. I'm not going to go into detail on that right now. That's kind of the back end of what the code calls this tab, right? So this is the view, like the label that's actually displayed to the user. So now if I come in, see this says plants.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's literally all I had to do was just change that to plants. And now that text says plants. Now the icon is a triangle, and that really doesn't make sense for plants. So the cool thing, this is like there's so many cool things about Ionic, but this is one of the really cool things is you can go in here and they have all these icons. So I just did a search for Ionic Icons. They have this website here, and there's all these different icons you can go through and choose from, or you can search. So I'm going to do a search for just plant. There's a leaf, maybe there's a seedling. No, well, I'll do that plant for now. That'll work. So if I want to use this little leaf here, I click on it and it gives me the code for what I need right here. So leaf-outline is the name of this icon, okay? So if I come back into Visual Studio Code, this Ion icon thing is already here, so I don't need to copy everything I have. I can just change this triangle to be leaf-outline. And now I come over into the app again, and now we have that little leaf.
That's cool.
I'm going to go ahead and take the -outline off of it, because another cool thing about Ionic is there's all these different versions of leaf. So there's going to be leaf and leaf outline and leaf solid. I just want it to be like the regular leaf, like that. So I'm just going to, so I took the outline off and now it's just leaf. So now we have.
Wait, what if you wanted what if you wanted it to be green?
So if I want it to be green, we would have to go in and change the styling of it.
Is that hard?
It's not hard. It's just probably, let's come back to that once we've built like kind of, and that can be kind of the next round of it is like styling and stuff.
Okay, cool.
That's a great question. And like, we probably will like change something color-wise along the way as we go, as kind of in the list or something. So we'll kind of see some of those ideas as we go. So we have this tab called plants. Now we need to make this tab itself be different. So if we come back into the code, here's this tab 1 page HTML. Okay. So here's all the view that's shown for it. So right now we have this tab. I'm going to put this side by side with the app. I think that'll make it easier probably. And I'm going to get rid of that. Okay. Can you see that well enough?
Yeah, that looks, that helps a lot actually.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So we have this tab 1 right here. You know, one thing I haven't really even mentioned yet is how cool it is that like you can come in here and change text here, and as soon as you save, it automatically reloads it to show your changes.
That's
so
wild.
Back in the day, like if you wanted to make a change, you had to like go through you had to make the change, go through this whole compile process, of rebuilding all the code. And sometimes it was like 15 minutes before you could see that change again.
Dang.
Like that's how it used to be. So it's just, it blows my mind to see like how this kind of stuff works and how simple it is. You know, I mean, really, it's again, it's just text files. Okay, so I'm going to delete this App Explorer container part. And I don't want to go into too much detail about what it is, other than saying it's this part here, this Explorer UI components. It's that.
Okay.
I don't need that, so I'm going to delete that. Okay, so now we have just a blank page. Okay, so now we're ready to kind of build whatever we want. So we know that we want to have a list of plants, right? So we want to have like, and this is what I knew kind of going into, is I wanted this app to be like a list of a bunch of plants and like different information about each plant that I kept having, that I was answering over and over again in YouTube comments of like, how many, how far do you space these? When can I plant these in North Carolina? Like all these different questions I was getting. I wanted to build an app to like automatically answer that stuff for people. That was kind of where I was coming from. So I wanted to have a list for each plant and then just some data for each plant. That's where I started with it. So let's go over here and the Zoom window keeps getting in my way. I can't see what I'm doing. Here we go. All right, so if I go back to the Ionic website and I go to the Ionic docs that they have here with all the examples, and then I go to components. Is my dog being super distracting, the barking?
No, it's fine. Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, cool. So if I come in here to these UI components and I look through all of here, eventually I'll get to list. So they already have like code for how to do a list. So if I come in here and then I'm going to switch to Angular, React and all these are just different frameworks. Angular is the one that we're using. I may talk later about why and the difference and all this kind of stuff, but there's so many rabbit holes I could go down, and I'm really trying to restrain myself from going down all of them. So I'm just going to switch to the Angular one here, and I'm going to go full screen on this page because I want you to see this part over here. It doesn't show when you're not full screen, because this is actually like the one that I saw that I wanted to pull from. So this code I can pull from this view source here, and from here I can come in and here's this actual code that was used for that part. So here's like the fin, I'm a big deal. Like I don't know if you remember, let me go back to that part so you can see this fin, I'm a big deal, listen, like all that part is all just right here.
Right.
So we have a list. So this HTML starts with this list element. I'm not going to talk too much about how HTML works, but I'm going to kind of touch on a little bit. So there's these different elements that are within the file. So each one of these things that's within these angled brackets is called an element. So ion list is an element that we're going to pull from. So if I copy that and come over into here and just paste it. Oops, I didn't copy it right. Try it again. It's funny how like things always, I guess that doesn't actually highlight it. I thought it was highlighting it, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I thought it was too.
Okay. All right, so now I'm gonna come back into here. And if I save this, and I actually pull this back up again over here so we can see our app. So here's what we have in our app now, just by pasting that over. Now the images aren't working because we don't have those image files. Excuse me, we don't have those image files in our project. So we'll fix that here in a minute. We'll get the images switched to where we want them to be, all that kind of stuff. But right now we have a list of different items, which is, we knew we wanted a list. Now we just need to make this be vegetables instead of Star Wars characters. So let's come into here and we just have a list of things here. So I know, like, let's just start with some random plants. We'll do basil. And I knew that like one big thing about plants is like, do you plant them in like in the hot or the cold? Because that's really, there's two different types of plants, warm season and cool season. So I knew that like I wanted to have, not warm, like a warm season and cool season. So I'll have that as maybe for each plant. And then I wanted to have like when you should plant it related to frost date. So like something like that for each plant. So there's one plant. We'll fix the image here in a minute. We'll come back to that. I'm gonna kind of go through and just put a few plants in here. So carrots, they're cool season. And then you plant them. I'm not going to do like all of them because I think you're already starting, and maybe this is already clicked, but like this whole process of typing all of this in here into this file, imagine how chaotic this would be once you get to over 100 plants. And once you have like, maybe you have 10 data points for each one. It would be chaos trying to manage it. This file would be thousands of lines long. It would just like, it would take you a long time. Like that's kind of where we'd be, right? So there's some ways that we can make that easier that we'll get to here in just a minute. But I'm going to stop for now with just two, the ones I've already done, and then we'll circle back and do some more. So let's go ahead and get an image working. Let's talk through that here for a second, kind of how images work. So this image thing, this isn't an Ionic thing at all. This is straight up HTML. So if you've ever done HTML, this is the same way that you would just add an image to a website. So the source equals is just referencing a folder that's within the project of where things are. So I don't. So this is saying like the root of it, like avatar fin. That's not where we're going to have it in this project. In this project, everything goes under assets. So all of the image files will go under assets. So we're going to put it under, instead of this root, we're going to do assets. And then we'll have this one called basil. And then this one. Okay, so we don't have a file there already. Let me grab an image real fast, and then I will we'll use that one. One moment. I think I have a picture of basil sitting in there somewhere. Okay. All right, so I found a picture of basil. And now I'm going to come in here to this assets, and of course it's not going to let me paste it in. See, I told you this random stuff would not work sometimes. That's how coding goes sometimes. And now my dog is barking again. All right, assets. So now we have under here, and I'm going to rename this file just to basil. So it's basil.jpg. And if I come back in here and fix this, because I had JPEG instead of, okay. All right, so now I did a lot there. Zach, you cool?
Yeah, no, I thought it was really cool that you could just drag and drop into the assets folder. Yeah. No,
so this is what we have now. So we have a list going here. Now it says recent conversations. Let's change that. Let's make that be, well, we already have the plants up there, don't we? So let's put both in there and see which one looks better. You know what? I don't think we need the big one anymore. So let's just take all of that out. We don't need that header. And now it's just going to be plants. We have tab 1 up top. This is, I think for that, we're just going to take text out, because I think we're going to have, like, eventually there'll be buttons and stuff up there, you know? We already have where, so like, we're not going to take the toolbar completely out because we're going to need stuff up here. So a menu button, I think, would eventually go there, because I like to have menu and tabs. So the tabs are like the most important things they should look at, and then the menu kind of has extra stuff. And then like over on the right, there's like a share button, like stuff like that is typically in a mobile app. So I think we'll just reserve this whole top toolbar for that kind of stuff. We have this plants here, we have a list going, So like already, look, we're like a couple minutes into this, however long it's been, we already have something that feels like an app, kind of, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
and like I started to get really excited at this point, and like about this is about the point where my life took a sudden turn into becoming a developer because I could not contain my excitement. I was so, just seeing that this is literally all it takes. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot more you got to learn, and it took like, I mean, I still do this, right? I obsessively try and learn stuff, but it took me 3 months of working at this, every day and learning, watching stuff to get to the point where I was, able to get a job as a developer.
Yeah.
Because I started learning this in July or August, and I became a developer at my job where I am now in January. And that's when we released the first version of this app, was in January. So that's how long it took. I was obsessively doing it. I would not set 3 months as a timeline unless you are obsessive like me and don't want to sleep, which I don't recommend doing because I was losing too much sleep over it. And in a good way though. It's fun to do that sometimes. So let's talk now about kind of some of the other steps, and I want to introduce a couple other concepts because right now we've only touched the HTML. Let's start doing some stuff to make things work a little bit different. So we've already talked about kind of one of the problems we already see of, let me plug in my MacBook. It is getting close to dying. When we started this video, I was outside and we were going to do this out there, and then the roosters wouldn't shut up. So Zach and I had to start over and had to come inside. So, all right. So let's go through and now make this more dynamic so that we don't have to go through and type like over here, all of this, like for each one that we want to change. We don't have to have all this repeating code. Like anytime you have code that's duplicated like this, generally that's a bad idea. Mm-hmm. So let's jump in. I'm going to make this full screen again. And I'm going to open a second tab. So just like a browser, like just having two tabs in a browser, have them side by side. This is going to be another file. I opened this with the shortcut of Command 2. That can be Control 2 if you're on Windows. But that just opens a second tab. And now I'm going to open the other file that we have for tab page, this TypeScript file, this .ts. I'm going to open that over here. So TypeScript is something that sits on top of JavaScript, and this is another like wrinkle that's like, whoa, something else I gotta learn. I know. That's how I felt the same way. I'm gonna try my best to explain what TypeScript is and why it matters. So JavaScript can be a difficult language to work with because it's very easy to do silly things and it doesn't really like tell you did something wrong. You've got to dig deep to figure out, oh, well, I should have typed this instead of that. So TypeScript is built on top of JavaScript to help make it to where it keeps things safe. So it warns you if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. It does all sorts of stuff. But the point is, that's what TypeScript is. It's just kind of an extra helper that sits on top of JavaScript. You don't have to use it, but I definitely benefited from it using it as I was learning, because as I saw errors, it would teach me things I was doing wrong with code. So it was like an automated helper or teacher as I was going along. And I'll do some stuff as we go and you'll kind of see what I'm talking about, kind of,
okay.
How TypeScript helps and all that kind of stuff. So, okay, so we're going to go through and set up the data for the HTML to pull from here instead. And the reason for that is, well, you'll see here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and start setting up the data over here in the TypeScript. So, and this is going to be probably new stuff that you've seen, so please bear with me on this. I'm going to try my best to kind of explain it as we're going here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in now and start building the data that we have over from the HTML directly in the TypeScript, and then we will make it to where the HTML pulls that data from the TypeScript. Does that make sense? Kind of what we're doing? The overall goal of what we're trying to do? Okay. Yeah. So the first thing we do is we need to set up the data over in the TypeScript. So what we're going to do is we are going to set up a new variable. I'm not going to go down too much of the rabbit hole of what all this means. This is all JavaScript stuff. So yeah, I'll talk more about where you can learn more about this once we get kind of done building this. But this is going to be a JavaScript thing where we're going to set up a new, we're going to set up an array of data. So array just means multiple items. Okay, we want this data to contain multiple things, multiple sets of plants in it. So we're going to call it plants. So the way I can declare a new property in TypeScript is just to literally type it here. And then we're going to say it equals an array. This square bracket thing that you see is an array. So anytime you see that, it means it contains multiple things. So this could be like, if I didn't have any other data, like the array could be that, right? That's multiple plant names, but that's not what we need, because we need to have like multiple data points for each one. So basil needs to have like warm season and like this text that goes with it, and each plant needs to have kind of different things that go with it, right?
Yeah.
So we need to set up what's called an object, which is a collection of properties that go together. So I'm going to delete this that we did here. And I'm going to say too, like, this is the part that I got like overwhelmed with in the beginning, that I had to go learn. Like, I didn't understand all this after the first hour at all. Like, Justin helped me build this. I saw how it was working, and then I kind of learned from there. So don't feel like you need to understand how this is working right now, or the syntax of how I'm typing it. All of this was overwhelmed, because there's square brackets, there's squiggly brackets, there's arrows, there's all this different stuff of like, it's very overwhelming. Right. So please, if you're feeling that way, I felt the same way at this point. But I saw like the hope that one day I could know what this meant. So we have plants. We're going to have, the first one is basil. We're going to set up properties for each one of these. So we have name. We need to figure out what to name this other property. So we'll call season type. And I'm going to do it just like this, and we'll talk about the season part and all that. I'm going to introduce kind of a concept with that. So we're just going to do warm for now, because we know it's going to be season for each one. So if I put warm season, that's a bunch of duplicated text over and over. We can get around that, and I'll show that here in a minute. And then we have kind of like planting date description. So when to plant. And this one, okay, so now for basil, we have this object. It's a collection of properties that represents what basil is in the application's eyes. Does that make sense, that part?
Yes.
Okay, so now we need another one for carrots. I'm just going to copy what we've done, put a comma, paste it. And now I can just change this to carrots. It's cool. And then copy this, paste it over. Okay, so now we have this data that we have here over here. Okay, put a semicolon for that so that squiggly goes away. All right, so now we need to use this over here. So before I do that, do you have any questions over kind of what we've done so far, or you ready to dive in?
I feel like if we dive in, you'll kind of answer the question.
Okay, cool. So if I'm going to delete the second one, because we only need one of these, and I need to repeat this for every plant that's in here. Okay, so that's what I want to do. I want to have one of these for each thing that I have in here. That's the goal that we're trying to do here. Okay, so the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this Angular thing. So this is like one of those things you're going to have to learn with the Angular framework stuff. And it's called ng4. Now, this is the Intellisense stuff I was talking about, where it makes it easy to find some of this stuff, right? So ng4 equals, and there's examples for this on the Angular site. But what we're doing is we're creating, so I typed it out now to explain what this means. So let plant of plants. So what this is saying is create, so think of let means let there be, okay? Like let there be light, let there be a plant from each item that's in plants. That's what this is saying, okay?
Okay.
So what this will do is it'll duplicate this code for each item that's in this array.
Okay.
So I'm going to take out this like specific stuff that we have right now about it here, and I'm going to help to illustrate what this means. So This is just going to be plant name. And I'll talk about how we actually move it over here in a second. I don't want to introduce that quite yet. But what's going to happen is that this data here is going to be repeated for each one. So when we go back, there should be 2 items that say plant name, season, when to plant. I killed the server whenever I shut this. I'm gonna re-up that.
Okay.
Whenever I did the reload thing, because I was trying, yeah, that shut it down. So. If I come back into here, I can watch it and see. Oh, there. All right, so let me go back into Chrome so we can see it there because that was Safari that came up. Okay, so now we have plant name, season, when to plant. We have it duplicated. That's obviously not what we want. We want the actual data from the other one. So let's make that happen now. And this is where I've got to introduce kind of a new thing to you, another special character on the keyboard that before now you didn't care about, that now you're going to care about. So double squiggly. I guess it's the same character as before, but now there's 2 of them. Double squiggly means I want to use something from JavaScript here. So what I want is plant dot, and then now see how it makes it easy with this Intellisense stuff? Yeah. I want name, plant dot name. So now if I save that and go in here, basil carrots. See how it just pulled that over for each one and put it in there? Here, let me put them side by side again.
I guess my question is, why does that save you any time? I mean, like, what is that really saving you?
Well, imagine, so think of all the code that would be here if I had all of this duplicated. So that's kind of the first point that it, now long term, it gets like where it saves us is we want all of this data. We don't want it in a Typescript file eventually. We want it up in a database. That way we can change it and it pulls down into the app. So eventually that's what we'll get to.
Okay.
But kind of, you know, the first step along the way when you're learning is to move it over into this type of file so you understand how that works. Because then the next step of pulling from a database is just calling out to the database, to the website saying, give me this data, and it sends it down and the data looks like this. So by the time the data gets down to the HTML, it's going to look like this either way. It's just going to come from the server instead. So ultimately, that's like the big reason. But a big reason from here too, just imagine like how this file would look if I had, you know, 100, I'm duplicating this line all the way down. Right. So like, just imagine how big this would be of all the different things. And then if I wanted to do like, so say if I wanted to do a calculation on the data, I can't do it if it's over here. Like this isn't data that's accessible via the program. This is just data that's being shown to the user. So if I wanted, so right now I don't have anything to calculate, but see the Spoon does now, you know, like there's all sorts of stuff for calculating based on different data points. So if you want to be able to use like the program to do that, then you got to do it in, you know, that form of data. It can't be in the HTML. So I'm going to undo all this that I did.
You're creating like a batch, like so you can batch automate. So you don't have to go, like, so if you wanted to change like one particular thing, you wouldn't have to go through line by line. You could go, okay, I'll just change the main, the batch, and it will affect everything all at once. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Exactly. That's kind of, so if we keep going through here, so we've got plant name, plant.season. Season type. So this is kind of another little wrinkle we need to do, because if I just do plant.season type, I'm going to put these, can you see, like if I go side by side like this, let me maybe make this. Yeah, I can see. Cool. Okay. So now see, it just says warm and cool. Like that's not what we want. We want to say warm season or cool season. So I can just come in here and add the word season there. And now that's going to show after it for each one. See how we can kind of intermix in data from the Typescript with data from here? See how those can go like right next to each other? Yeah. So one problem we have though is warm and cool are in the wrong case.
Like that's weird that that's lowercase and that's uppercase, right?
Right.
So one of the things about Angular is it makes it easy to fix stuff like that by doing this thing. So this is called a pipe in Angular. What you're doing is you're piping the data through a transformation. So I'm transforming it into title case.
Okay.
Again, not something you have to fully understand now. This is just one of those Angular things that you'll learn if you go through like an Angular training course or something like that I went through. But the point is it's that simple to do stuff like that. So if I wanted to make this uppercase, it would do that. Like there's all these different options, and there's also options for like dates. So if I wanted to take a date and only show like the month from it, like there's a way to do that kind of stuff easily, you know? So like, that's like the cool thing. That's one of the cool things about Angular is it makes all this kind of stuff really easy. I don't have to have like, without Angular, I would have to have a function in here that took in the season type, and then it checked the first character in the string, like of what it was, to see if it was uppercase, and then uppercase it if not. Like I'd have to have like all this extra code to do that kind of stuff. That it's just one little thing I have to do with Angular. That's the difference of like what a framework does for you and why they're used, you know, pretty much extensively now.
Okay, makes sense.
Is Angular, React, and Vue are the three frameworks that are used pretty much extensively on the web and now in mobile development like this, which is built for the web.
Okay.
Okay, so we have those two, and now we need the last one. So this one should be pretty simple. We don't need to do any transformations on that, I don't think. So plant.when-to-plant. Okay, so now we have a list of a couple plants, and if we wanted to go in and add more, so there's like I know I'm like duplicating stuff. There's keyboard shortcuts that you can duplicate things up or down. So that's what I did to do that. Another one of the cool things about Visual Studio Code is its ability to do that kind of thing. So it makes it very easy and quick to edit files like that.
Right.
Now that I think about it, carrots are 6 weeks and broccoli is 4 weeks. See, now it shows. So now we need to get the image working. So right now we have the image source is blank. We need to add a property for each one of these for image now. And here I'm going to do another cool like Visual Studio Code thing, which like this applies to like not even coding. Like if you need to change something in a text file and you have multiple places to change it, this will work in any text file. So in VS Code, you can hold down Alt or Option and click in multiple places. And now my cursor works in all of those places. So hold on, I've got a comma there already. So now it's like it was before where there's no comma. So I can click in each one of these and type comma, goes in all three places, enter down, type image, goes everywhere. And then for now, I'm just gonna do that. And then I'll go back and change it like individually for each one. But look, right now I have that done for all three.
That's awesome.
So that's even something just editing a text file. Like there's been so many cases in my life where I need to do something like that, where that would have really helped.
Right.
Because there's all sorts of tools for like finding text, and I could go down the rabbit hole of all that kind of stuff. Okay, so image. The only one let's just get Bazel working, and then once we see that working, we know that's going to work, and I'm not going to go find images for all these other ones right now. So we need to set the source to be, so this is one thing that, because I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but this is an input property. So we're sending over a path from Typescript. We're not actually like typing it in manually. So we need to put the square brackets around it. I'm not going to be able to explain that very well right now, but just trust me on that one. This is one of those things you'll just have to learn with HTML. But if we do that, then we can do plant.image. If I didn't do that, then it's not going to work. I'll show you. So it doesn't work. But if I switch this to say, hey, I'm passing in a property. Okay, so now we have the image pulling over for Bazel. I don't really like the way that image looks though. It's too small. So right now it's using an Ion avatar. I'm going to switch it to an Ion thumbnail. Like back then, I would have had to go look in the documentation to know it was thumbnail. I just know now. But but if I wanted to go like look at it, like up in here, back to this list of components that we had,
Right.
there's a media section. So like there's avatar, icon, image, and thumbnail.
Ah, okay.
So that's how I can. So if you're like out there and you want to like know where these options are, this is where I went to find that, and now I just remember what they are. And once you've used them a few times, you'll just kind of know what they are, and you've used like the same ones multiple times. Okay, so going back over to here now. All right, so we've got a list of plants. We've got it pulling from data that's over in the Typescript. Let's go ahead and add like a logo up on top to like above here, because I already had like a logo for Seed to Spoon, and I knew I wanted that to be up there. So let's go ahead and put that in there. I'm gonna put it just like right above the list. I copied that image thing that we already had over there because I'm just gonna reuse it. And this one we're gonna put in the path manually. So logo PNG. I'm gonna go find a logo real fast. All right, so I've got a logo that I pulled down into my assets, logo.png. So we go in here and look at the image. The source is assets, logo, PNG. So here's a good way to show like the example. See the difference between the source, if it's just like manually typed in, versus if it's a property you're passing in. It's just these square brackets.
There's no brackets.
Yeah, because I'm not passing anything into it. I'm passing in a string that I'm typing right here. I'm not passing in a variable from the Typescript.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay,
so you're just gonna drag and drop that into the assets folder.
Yep, and now there we go. So now we have. It looks like a little big and stuff. I think it's the image itself. Yeah, it's the image itself. I can't go in like. I have another logo where it's cropped down and stuff, but like that's more spacing than I would normally want. So I'd probably bring that other logo in. And so let's do a little bit of styling, because you mentioned earlier wanting to like make something look different. So let's do a little bit of that. So let's make maybe the name of the plant be, well, first of all, let's make a title case, and let's do bold, and maybe let's just start with bold and see how that looks. Can you try that?
Sure.
Okay, so we have the plant name here. It's this element here. So this is just like if you did like MySpace stuff back in the day. It hasn't changed. So you can see how I can go through and make that bold just by changing this style thing that I added here on the H2.
Yeah. That's
all it takes. So there's all these. So this is HTML and CSS. So like knowing what the different options are, that's something you just have to learn. Okay. But this is a thing that makes it nice is, again, Visual Studio Code. If I just type font, and when I was learning, I would literally just go through and read every single one of these. I would type different words, like go through and read them all, like, because look at all the different properties. There's so many things you can change. Now, these are the properties here, the wrench that you see.
So do you want to go and talk about where someone can go and learn, like, the extra stuff?
Okay, yeah, good point. So let's go ahead and jump in now and talk about, so if you made it this far and you're like, all right, I want to, where do I go? Like, where do I learn more? How do I do this? Let's jump in and talk about that. So when I learned, I used this site called Pluralsight, and these are basically training videos that are built by developers that work hand in hand with the various teams that produce this technology to make sure these courses are always up to date. So if you want to learn something about software development, then you can come in here and they have every different thing you could imagine. So I knew I wanted to learn Angular, so I came in here and I started with Angular, and then they have these paths that you can go down, and it'll take you through all the different courses that you need to learn. starting with like introduction one. So this Angular getting started one here, this 5-hour course was the one I started with. And I basically just repeated this course over and over until I felt like I understood decently what was going on. And then I moved down to each one. So, but this is, this is a little deeper into it. I kind of started with a foundation in HTML and CSS because I'd done a lot of like just random editing of that kind of stuff, since I was a kid. So, but if you're coming into this without much of a foundation in HTML, CSS, that kind of stuff, then I really recommend starting with Free Code Camp. So Free Code Camp is an organization that was built to help people learn how to code with a free resource. So if you come in here and click Get Started, there's all these different sections you can go through to learn the different skills that you need. So if it's HTML, then you can come in here and then you can start on this introduction one, and it's going to go through and start with a lot of the stuff you saw today. Like, so this is where I recommend starting if you're looking to get into it. You need to go through and have a good sense. So if I were wanting to build, if I were guiding someone on building a mobile app, I would recommend going through Free Code Camp and learning pretty much everything in this section, this responsive web design, and then the JavaScript section. I think these two sections would be important to go through and get a good understanding of how that stuff works before you jump into kind of the framework side of it. So once you've gone through these two, then go through an Angular course. There's a lot of different courses out there. I recommend Pluralsight. I know it's a paid resource. I think it's $20 a month. I know for some people that it's not possible, and I completely understand that. So if you can't afford Pluralsight, there's other sources that are out there. I will say they're not going to be as good as this because Deborah Corrado works hand in hand with the Google team to keep them up to date, and I consider her courses the Bible for Angular development for me. But like I said, there are other resources out there. Also, if you go to Ionic's website, they have a bunch of resources here as well under this resources, and there's all sorts of blogs and different people that have made training videos on YouTube, and just all sorts of stuff out there to learn from. So that's basically what I did whenever I started. I went through and I had this app, that we built today in my hands, not on my phone, but I had it on my browser. And that was enough fuel to the fire for me to get me going and to make it to where I went through and learn more. So if you're out there and you want to learn more, these are the resources I suggest going to. There's a lot of different places though. Zach, you have any questions over that stuff I just showed? You want to see more details?
Yeah, well, at the top it says 300 hours. That's a bit intimidating. So
yeah,
you think that's accurate?
If you're coming into it with absolutely no knowledge, but I think for you, this stuff is going to be like, you're going to see this, go, oh, I remember doing that. Like, oh, I remember seeing this. You just didn't know what it was called. If you're if you grew up on the internet and you like I said, you had a MySpace or you had like that kind of stuff, like this is all stuff that you saw there. Or if you've done any type of like HTML editing, like WordPress type stuff, like it's probably not gonna all be new to you.
Okay.
But I do want to say, like, yeah, it's going to take, like, there's definitely, I don't know if the 300 probably isn't right. I mean, I have to translate how many days that is. Yeah, it's going to take work to go through and learn. Don't get me wrong. But the point is, it's not unattainable, and it's something that you can do without having to pay money to pretty much anyone besides Pluralsight if you want to go down the Angular site and down the Angular path. But, I was able to get a job as a software developer with no college degree. I had some background in other type of software type jobs, quality assurance and that kind of stuff, but I wasn't a coder. And I was able to learn all of this on nights and weekends I had 3 kids at the time. I have 4 now. They were all young. 2 of them were in diapers. I was able to do all of that basically just by the time I used to watch a lot of TV and stuff. I took that out, and video games were the big thing. I used to be addicted to video games. So I had to unplug my Xbox and like put it away so I'd stop playing. But I just took all of that time that I spent on that before and put it on this. And it paid off. I mean, it was definitely something that was worth doing, but I know there's a lot of people out there that are kind of in that position I was in back then, where I didn't know what I wanted to do with my career. I had, I had, 4 kids, and they get more and more expensive every year they get older. And, so
Right.
I was stressed, and I also, I wanted to build an app too, that was, so like those kind of forces combined to give me what it took to go through it. So, but it's not unattainable. And like you saw today, it's just text files, and it's just learning how these things work together. And there's a whole community out there of people that are willing to help and to answer questions. If you're in Oklahoma, there's this organization called Techlahoma that is great, that has all sorts of meetups and user groups and a Slack channel that helps and stuff. And wherever you are, I guarantee there's a community that's helping. And there's communities on the internet. The Ionic forum is awesome. So if you want to go down this Ionic path, just get plugged into these forums and stuff. And
Nice.
yeah, it's going to take work though. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's taken a lot of work.
So you said you wanted to build an app. Would you advise someone to kind of have an idea that they're working on while they're learning it, so they can apply the knowledge to something that they're kind of interested in building themselves?
It helps. It helps keep you going, because I had tried to learn how to code, like 10 years ago, and I stuck with it for like 2 or 3 weeks, like some like C++ course or whatever, and just never really kept my attention. But having something that I wanted to build that I kept coming back to every day, because there was always a new feature I wanted to add. Like, instead of saying like plant 2 weeks after your frost date, I wanted to figure out how to figure that out for people by checking to see where they lived. And, that was like a super complicated thing. And so like, there's all these things that you keep wanting to build things, and that drives your interest in wanting to learn and to keep going. So if you have a project or something that you can build, that will definitely help. There's a ton of example apps out there though. And a lot of what I did was just building example apps, because there's a lot of tutorials on YouTube even where someone will go through and build an app kind of like we did today, basically doing what we did today, but in longer form and, more detail. And just building those sample apps, and then taking pieces of what you learn in all these simple sample apps and putting them together in what you want.
Cool. Nice. Well, thanks for showing me how to do this.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hopefully everyone else gets some value out of this. Like I said, this is something I've wanted to make for a long time, because I want people to understand that coding is something that, anyone can do. And it can really change your life. I mean, there's so many career opportunities out there. We only have our farm because of coding, because I'm able to work remotely. I'm able to work from home. Even before COVID, I was working from home, and a lot of jobs, maybe now it'll be the case where they're like that, but before COVID, it really was pretty rare. And there's just a lot of opportunity in it. So I want people to not be intimidated like I was for a long time.
Awesome. Well, I definitely am less intimidated now that you show me how to do that. So, I mean, because I've had some ideas for apps and stuff, and now it seems kind of attainable. It was like, oh, okay, just figuring out putting, code where, and, just kind of really understanding the language and terminology. I'm kind of a person who's goal oriented, so I have to build something, kind of on the job training. So I wouldn't survive just learning, the random training and then not using it immediately. So
me too. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, if you're out there and you have questions over what we just did, I'm sure there's a lot of questions, because I dumped a lot of information on y'all. Feel free to leave them in the comments. I will do my best to try and keep up. I will try and do a follow-up video, hopefully, if there's interest, we can expand on what we built today, and maybe just keep building more on top of it, or doing something, or we could talk about doing another video to kind of go in more detail on something. So yeah, thank you. If you made it this far, thank you. We've been talking for a long time. I hope it was worth it for you, and I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate you, Zach, for doing this.
All right, thanks for having me, showing me all this stuff. I appreciate you.
All right, we'll talk to you all of y'all later. Thanks, everyone.